You won't believe what happened when the HOA thought they could get away with something outrageous. Picture this. One afternoon, I get a frantic call from my son. He's been arrested by what looks like a couple of cops. But something didn't add up. These so-called officers weren't even wearing proper uniforms. They were fake cops, and they were working on behalf of the HOA. Yes, you heard that right, the Homeowners Association. But here's the kicker. They had no idea who I am. You see, I'm not just any regular person in this neighborhood. I'm actually the real police commissioner. And when I found out what they'd done, my blood ran cold. What right do they have to pull something like this? How far are they willing to go to harass people? My son, of all people, arrested for no reason, just because the HOA thinks they're above the law. Now, I'm left with one question. What happens when someone who's supposed to uphold the law is wronged by people who think they can make their own rules? Trust me, this story is far from over. Stick around to see how it all unfolds and the shocking twist you won't see coming. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. The HOA have been a thorn in my side for months now. It started with petty complaints about the lawn not being perfectly manicured or the color of the mailbox not meeting their standards. I brushed it off at first, but soon enough, they started pushing harder. They seemed to have a strange sense of entitlement, as if they were the ones running the neighborhood, not the residents. But this was a whole different level. I couldn't believe they'd go as far as to hire people to impersonate law enforcement. It was a blatant power grab. What were they hoping to accomplish? Did they think they could intimidate us into submission? I immediately called the local precinct to check if any officers had been dispatched to my house. Of course, none had. The more I dug, the more I realized that the HOA had acted on their own. No oversight, no accountability. They'd taken matters into their own hands, thinking no one would notice. I had to act fast. My son was scared, confused, and now he was facing charges for something he didn't even do. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the chilling realization that if they could do this to my family, who else could they target? What else were they capable of? The feeling of powerlessness was starting to turn into something much darker. As I paced back and forth, the weight of the situation hit me harder. This wasn't just about my son anymore. This was about standing up to a corrupt system, one that was willing to manipulate and intimidate anyone who dared to challenge it. The HOA thought they could get away with it, but they hadn't realized they were up against someone who had the power to expose them for what they really were. I couldn't stop thinking about the fake cops. Who were they really, and who authorized this? As far as I knew, the HOA had no legal grounds to arrest anyone, let alone pretend to be law enforcement. This had to be more than just a few rogue employees making a mistake. There was something bigger going on here, and I needed to uncover it. Fast. I decided to pay a visit to that HOA office the next morning. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew I couldn't let them off the hook. When I walked in, the receptionist gave me a nervous look. It was clear she knew something wasn't right. As I made my way to the office of the HOA president, my heart raced. This was it, my chance to confront them, to get some answers. But when I opened the door, the room was empty. No one was there. Just a stack of papers, some folders with personal information, and a large framed picture of the HOA president shaking hands with someone I didn't recognize. I took a deep breath. Something told me that photo wasn't just a coincidence. It felt like a clue, one that might lead me straight to the heart of the mystery. But what was I getting myself into? Would I uncover the truth, or dig myself deeper into a web of lies and deceit? As I stood there, staring at the framed photo, a chill ran down my spine. The handshake seemed so innocuous at first glance, but something about it nagged at me. The person the HOA president was shaking hands with had a stern look, dressed in a suit I didn't recognize. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary photo. It was more like a hidden message. What if this man was somehow connected to the fake cops? What if he was the key to everything? I decided to take a picture of the photo and leave the office before anyone showed up. There was no time to waste. I needed answers, and fast. I went straight to the local library and spent hours combing through public records, trying to track down any connection between the HOA president and the man in the picture. Then I found it. His name, Michael Grant, a businessman with ties to some very shady individuals. And more importantly, he had a history of involvement in lawsuits where illegal practices were questioned. Suddenly, everything clicked. The HOA wasn't just a group of power-hungry individuals. They were part of something far bigger, something dangerous. My son's arrest was just a small piece of a much darker puzzle. But as I dug deeper into Grant's connections, I realized I was getting closer to something I shouldn't be touching. The tension in my chest tightened. If I wasn't careful, I could end up exposing myself and my family to even more danger than we'd already faced. Just as I was about to call it a night, my phone rang. It was a private number. I hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end was low, almost whispering. "You don't know who you're messing with," the voice said. "Stop now before it's too late." The call ended abruptly, leaving me in the dark, but now, more than ever, I knew I was onto something huge, something I couldn't back away from. But who was behind the warning? And how far were they willing to go to keep me silent? I stared at the phone for a few moments, the eerie silence on the other end hanging in the air. My heart raced. Whoever was behind that call knew too much. They knew exactly what I was digging into, and they weren't going to let me get any closer to the truth. But I couldn't back down now, not after everything that had happened. My son, the fake cops, the shady connections. I was too deep in. The next morning, I received another call. This time, it wasn't a whisper, but a familiar voice. My son. He was shaken, scared, but he told me something that made my blood run cold. "Dad, they came back. The same guys. They were waiting for me at school. One of them said they knew who I was, who you were." The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. These weren't just random thugs the HOA had hired. This was a carefully orchestrated effort, one that was targeting my family directly. I had underestimated how far they'd go to protect their secrets. Whoever they were, they had resources, connections, and they weren't afraid to use them. I knew I had to get to the bottom of it, but the deeper I went, the more dangerous it became. I started looking into Michael Grant again, hoping to find a lead that would crack this wide open. That's when I stumbled upon a news article from years ago. It was a story about a major scandal involving property developers, secret kickbacks, and even local law enforcement turning a blind eye to it all. The article mentioned Grant's name, but the details were fuzzy, like someone had intentionally buried the truth. Just as I started connecting the dots, I received a message, but this time it wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. A photo of my house, taken from across the street, with a single line of text. "You're next." The fear was real now, but so was my determination. I had no choice but to move forward. If I didn't, my son and I wouldn't be safe. But with each step I took, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something far darker than I had ever imagined. The stakes were rising. Time was running out. I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Every move I made, every step I took, seemed to bring me closer to something dangerous. The threat hanging over my head was real, and if I wasn't careful, my son and I would be caught in the crossfire. I spent the next few days gathering evidence, documenting everything I could find on Michael Grant, the HOA, and their shady dealings. But nothing prepared me for what I uncovered. It wasn't just about property development or fake cops. There was a deeper, more twisted agenda at play. I discovered that Grant wasn't just a businessman. He was the front for an underground network of corrupt individuals who were using the HOA as a cover for money laundering and illegal real estate deals. The HOA president, the fake cops, even the threats, it was all part of a much larger scheme to control the neighborhood and manipulate the people in it. I knew I had to confront them directly. So one night, I made my move. I snuck into the HOA office with the evidence I'd gathered, ready to expose everything. But when I walked into the office, the last person I expected to see was standing there, my own wife. She looked at me, her face pale. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice shaking. "You have no idea what you're up against." I stood frozen. "What are you talking about?" Her eyes dropped to the papers in my hands. "Michael Grant isn't just some businessman. He's tied to people I've been working with. People who've been watching us for a long time. And I've been part of it." My mind raced. Everything, the phone calls, the threats, even the fake cops, it all clicked into place. My wife had been involved in this whole operation from the start. But why?